All right, so I'm very honored to be chairing this amazing panel discussion here. We're just discussing where to start, so we figured Evelyn is going to start with a big picture and big perspective. So we have about 90 minutes for this. So we'll start with about maybe 10 minutes or so, each person with kind of presenting. Some people have some slides or videos and so on. A few questions there, and then a general discussion in the end. And yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, hello. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. I know it's a long day. It has been for me. I'm going to talk to you, introduce you about what I do, and a little bit of what we do at NASA in my area. Again, my name is Evelyn Miralles. I work for NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And I've been there for over 25 years, basically supporting and building VR systems for astronaut training. Again, when we started many years ago, there wasn't any Unreal or Unity system that we can utilize in order to accomplish our goals. And our goal was very, very easy to go ahead and try to simulate a space using VR. Our findings throughout the years have been that really the hardware in VR and in general, PCs, computers have really gotten faster, cheaper, and we as developers have gotten more expensive, and also the content of what we were building in the context of building a scenario for a space was becoming more complicated as we went along. If you go back, and I hope some of you met and follow a little bit about the shuttle space program when we were doing it. I was a part of supporting the training team to give the astronauts an opportunity to do their task doing using virtual reality in this technology in particular. We learned a lot throughout the shuttle time and the small amount of time that we were having utilizing VR for that. And then immediately we were assigned to do and supply VR, utilize VR to build International Space Station. Now that was a big task. If you imagine trying to then simulate spacewalking and try to train astronauts to do these activities, we were not so much concerned about the experience. We were concerned about the tasks that we needed to accomplish in order to, do the assembly. We were assembly in a structure in a space orbiting the Earth, 250 miles above. How can we, replicate this environment? And we knew VR was going to be one of this. It was going to be the medium to do. There is, this is not an easy environment to play with, especially when you're doing it for training. It's very complicated, and every piece that comes along with that system have to fit in, and it has to help for you to do a positive training. There have been many cases when we have built something and do a scenario, and then we realize, you know what, this is negative. It's not going to give them anything new. It's better if the astronauts do it by themselves. So, and this is where VR and people that are doing this content and developing have to understand what is the purpose of what you're building this for. I talk a lot about VR. Obviously, that's what I've been doing. But there is a mixed realities in AR, which is very important. Augmented reality, I think, will help us now for space exploration for the future, because we're going to need more than showing the astronauts a full view of the space station on Earth. We already have done that. Now we're going to need an assistant to the astronaut when they go out there and spend a year or more time going into space. So, of course, I'm giving you my side of the space, and we have a full panel here with different experiences. But, space has given a lot of people a lot of inspiration, and I just wanted to be here today at this conference to really put in perspective on how incredible it is, the technology, and using it for something so complex as to travel into space. So anything is possible. You have the technology, the capability, the hardware is here today. We need people to build the content that is necessary and that will be important for your application, whatever that is. And I keep saying that because it's important what you're doing it for, whether it's research or any other field, medical, military applications, and so forth. There's so many things that VR can be so useful. And it's a matter of concentrating in the important parts within that system. Now, I did have a video. I don't know if you can play that right now. It's a short video of an astronaut getting untouched from the space station right now. He's going around the Earth, around in space, tumbling around. And our part of the training was to give him the tool, the VR tool, which is where he's at right now. He's in the simulator, tumbling around, and at some point he's going to stop. He's going to try to find the space station and then fly back. This system is what we call the SAFER, Simplify A for Aviate Rescue, and it's basically a jetpack that the astronauts use in order to rescue themselves if they get detached from the station. I mentioned this before. This is not like the Gravity movie. Things work very slow in space, which makes it nice for us to utilize this environment for training as well. The astronaut here is actually Tim Pick, is a British astronaut that went to space, came back, and he's doing his SAFER. Now he stopped at his rate, and he's trying to find the station, and now he's going to fly back. This scenario in real time, if an astronaut would have done it, it has to take less than 10 minutes. It all depends based on what inputs he makes to his hand controller that he has. It works like a gamepad, but it's not really a gamepad. But it's a hand controller that the astronauts have in their jetpacks. And again, we simulate all that in VR. And we started this many, many years ago. And this has been part of their training. Every single time they go into, and they're assigned for a spacewalk, they have to do this, they have to pass this class. They take a couple hours in the simulator and do it. If you look at maybe the whole scenario, you will say, well, it's not perfect, maybe this and that, but the point is that they're looking at the task. They have to perform, they have to get there. That's more important than anything else. We're simulating, they're tumbling, getting, detaching from the space station. We're simulating them based on their inputs into the system. This is all mathematical equations going behind the scene. And then he's putting his own input to get back. All that data is being captured internally, and we, more than anybody, the trainers that are involved with doing the procedure will create all the data necessary to see if they pass or fail. And after that, then they are ready to go into doing spacewalk. So here he's looking at his hand controller and looking to see how much gas he has left in life, because if he doesn't get there, he's done. He's lost in space. This is not a game, but it looks like a game, but it's not a game. So slowly he's gonna get back, and he's probably gonna hold one of the handrails, which is very scary to think that you're out there, you're trying to go back to station, but you don't know what power. You're trying to aim for something, and that's what they have to fly very well, and they know the dynamics and orbital dynamics in order to get back. But they need to get into an area where they can actually grasp something. And we have internally in the graphics, we have contact models that as soon as you grasp an object, especially handrail, that's what we're looking at, they can actually hold it, and you can see the guy being attached to that. So they know they actually accomplished the goal. Again, an astronaut can get pretty close to the structure and still grasp anything that is around. The only thing you don't want to touch are things that are, that can kill you, like a radiator or, a solar panel, or, you don't want to do that. But you want to save the life. So no matter how it goes, that's how. And he's getting closer. He will be final. I don't know if I'm over my 10 minutes, but about that. Yeah, but anyway, that's the visual that I brought. I just want to give you a real feel of a real video, not a video, a real training scenario that we do. Space moves very slow, so VR really helps on that, or VR has been pretty good in that. We don't need to do anything too fast, but we need to be precise. Components have to be precise. They have to articulate well. So how you build all that station is extremely important. That right there, he's gonna hold it. Hey, there you go. Then we applaud and say, okay, you did it. Let's do it again. Let's do it 3 more times. And we do that, and sometimes we do it in nighttime, which is very scary. So anyway, I can go on forever, but I can't. They have to pass it along.
Well, thanks so much, Evelyn.
Yes.
So maybe let's hear all the 5 different perspectives and then have a bit more complete picture of the different space aspects. What's to go next?
Has my presentation, maybe I should go and double check here, make sure that this is on. Yeah. How's my presentation coming along? Well, we'll find out in just a moment. Perfect. Well, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. I'm Barry Poe and Head of Product and Business Development at Ngrain. For those of you who might not be familiar with who we are, we're actually a mixed reality and artificial intelligence company based right here in Vancouver. We've been in business now for a little over 17 years, so almost as long as the last time VR was cool. And we've been in the business really looking at ways in which we can apply the technology to solve really challenging problems in the maintenance and repair space, specifically in areas like aerospace and defense, where you're constantly dealing with very complex equipment that needs to be maintained to a very high degree of operational reliability. I forgot to ask, is there a clicker or a way to advance slides? Thank you so much. This looks very complicated. All right. So maybe the simplest way that I can kind of express what it is that Ngrain does is that we're really focused in the space of automated damage assessment. So a way to think a little bit about what we do at Ngrain is to kind of set the stage when you're looking at how maintainers and inspectors work on aircraft today. And it is a real challenge to do proper assessment of an aircraft to make sure that it is in operating condition, partly because there are very few technological tools available to these inspectors who are really need to go and look at every aspect of the aircraft to make sure that it is in kind of operational readiness. And as a result, what we've done at Ngrain is to provide technology that allows them to take advantage of mixed reality, take advantage of artificial intelligence by replacing the manual aspect of damage assessment with the capability for them to use 3D scanners to acquire 3D scans of the surfaces of an aircraft or a piece of equipment that's under inspection. They can send it to our technology platform, which uses an expert AI approach to automatically detect, measure, and identify areas of an aircraft that have been damaged. And those results then come back to the inspector in the form of digital overlays or visual markups or summary reports that allow them to make a decision about what they need to do in order to make sure that that aircraft is in top shape. So if we could play that video. I'd just like to show you here how the technology works in practice, or an example of the technology at work.
Generations of talented Boeing employees helped build the world's largest aerospace company and shape the course of history.
Not the video. The slide, it's actually embedded in the presentation. Oh, are we just running it off of the web browser?
Yeah, I didn't download it properly.
Okay, not a problem. Then we'll skip the video. I did want to show how the technology works in practice, but in essence, rather than do a manual inspection of the aircraft, what you would end up doing is go through and use a 3D scanner, a portable handheld scanner, or some other device that might be attached to a mobile computing platform like a tablet, and we would capture a 3D digital scan of the surface of the aircraft that's in question. That scan would then get uploaded or sent to our platform for analysis, and our system would then come back and provide a report to that inspector with detailed locations of where all the damage is on the aircraft, how badly damaged individual parts of the aircraft are, and ultimately what work and effort would be necessary in order for them to be able to go and get the aircraft back into operating condition. So, just as I kind of mentioned a moment ago, NGrain has been in business for a little over 17 years. We have deployed our maintenance capabilities in over 27 countries around the world. There are companies in aerospace and defense, as well as energy, manufacturing, and healthcare, in fact, who use our technology to be able to support these kinds of maintenance and repair operations across a wide variety of equipment. One thing I'd kind of like to share is an example of NGrain's technology at work, and a really good example of where we've come from is the work that we do with Lockheed Martin. And Lockheed is a longtime NGrain customer. They've been customers of ours for over 8 years. We are the suppliers of the core technology that powers the battle damage assessment and repair capability for the F-35 and F-22 stealth fighter programs. And the genesis for all that work really came about from Lockheed and NGrain coming together and asking a very simple question, which is, what if we could take all of this maintenance paperwork that their maintenance teams create and we could find a way to digitize all of it? How useful would that be? And I also wanted to show you a video here to kind of talk a little bit about what the vision is. But suffice to say, what we have developed for Lockheed is the ability for them to now digitally document and identify damage that's been done to these aircraft. So whenever an F-35 or an F-22 comes off of the flight line and ends up in a hangar, those technicians from Lockheed and the US Air Force and other militaries are using our technology to identify and diagnose damage that's been done to those aircraft. So as a result, they're spending less time doing these maintenance activities, making sure that they get these activities done correctly and much more accurately than they could be done by hand. Among the things that we can do through our platform is help them identify damage that might be difficult for someone to see by hand. So if you were just using your eyes to go and take a look at an aircraft, you might not catch the same kinds of things that you might be able to catch with a high-resolution laser scanner. So once all of that information is available, we now have the ability to provide those maintainers, those technicians, with access to information that allow them effectively to make data-driven decisions. So we're no longer requiring somebody to rely on their subjective experience or their expertise per se to be able to make a final judgment. We're providing them with access to the right kind of data to make sure that they come to the proper decision based on the measurements that we get from those 3D scans. And I think, I think one theme that often comes up at a VR mixed reality conference is, especially if you're thinking of it from an industry perspective, is, what is the business case for the technology? How do I convince my boss that this is something that I should invest in? And I think that there's nothing better when your customers pay for the technology. And in Lockheed's case, we've got very good kind of examples of where the technology provides real value. So NGrain's relationship with Lockheed started with our involvement in the F-35 program. That eventually extended out to the F-22 program when they got exposed to the capability that we were providing. They said that it was an absolute must-have capability for them because of all of the advantages that I've just talked about. And it's kind of important to note that the F-22 program is a US-only program. So it is one of the ways in which the US is able to secure an air superiority advantage from a defense point of view. And so for a Canadian company to be involved in a US-only program is something that requires a tremendous amount of effort. But in fact, Lockheed and the US government were prepared to do that precisely because of the value that they see in the technology that we've been providing. So that in itself, I think, is a very good indication of what the real promise for mixed reality really is in this space, in that if you can get the technology focused on solving real problems, then in many ways, you are going to get people who are interested in kind of jumping through all the hoops to make sure that they can get access to it. So I realize there's probably a lot more that I could say. I'm sorry, I wish I could show you the videos, but certainly look forward to being able to take some questions with my fellow panelists here.
Yeah, right. Thanks so much. Do you want to continue?
And my slides are the Beamer slides. All right, so hey everybody, my name's Heidi. I'm the director of the Beamer Lab. So we are a lab within a larger Navy research lab down in San Diego, California. That research lab down in San Diego is called Space and Naval Warfare Systems Center Pacific. It's a mouthful. So that's the acronym spelled out there, SPAWAR Systems Center Pacific. And we are a Navy research lab made up of about 4,000 Navy civilian researchers, scientists, mathematicians, physicists, engineers, computer scientists. And what we focus on is R&D and development for C4ISR command and control systems, intel systems, cyber and space systems, and we fight and we build systems to fight across all the different warfighting domains. And so those domains span all the way from the lowest depths, which would be the seabed, all the way up to space. We do have a nanosatellite system within the Navy. And so, again, about 4,000 employees there, but the Beamer Lab is about 20 of those employees. But we have Navy research labs all over the world and the United States, so it's quite a few Navy civilians performing research. And just an overview of my lab. And so what we focus on is looking into all of the new VR and AR, computer gaming technology, hardware, software, and trying to figure out how the Navy is going to use it in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And so we use this lab that we've built. We've only been around for 2 years, but we use this lab that we've built as an education space and a demonstration space, because we have to educate people that come in, especially from these big Navy programs and groups, on what AR and VR is, because they don't understand the difference between AR and VR and mixed reality and all these things. But they also think, oh yeah, I saw VR back in the 80s or 90s and it sucked and I didn't like it and I'm not into it. Or they think it's like Ender's Game and Tron and Minority Report and all that, and they're like, yeah, I want that thing that I saw in Ender's Game where he was going like this, and we have to say, no, 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 it doesn't exist yet. So education is a big part of what we do. We do a lot of demonstrations. We let people get their hands on different technology in our lab. And in the last calendar year, again, we've only been around for 2 years, but in the last calendar year, we had nearly 5,000 people come through our lab. So we do a lot of demonstrations. And we were very proud to host the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Navy just last week, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, congressmen, admirals, generals, all come through our lab. And there's some snapshots of our lab. But so I want to give you a quick couple-minute video overview of what we do in our lab. This shows some of the different projects we're working on and what our lab kind of looks like. And so we're going to start off here with a little avatar that we have in our lab that's going to introduce the lab to you.
Welcome to the Beamer Lab. I'm Ava, your virtual assistant. In this lab, we're using immersive technologies to explore the spectrum of mixed reality in order to understand what the next generation will expect when they walk into the workplace of the future. We're applying both virtual and augmented reality technologies to nearly every aspect of naval affairs, including training, maintenance, design, and operations.
So as you saw in the video, we spend a lot of time working with the hardware and the software. So this is just some of the equipment that we have in our lab, and that we're trying to figure out whether the Navy is going to even use it. And so again, what you saw in the video was a lot of AR and VR, but across the 4 different domains of training, maintenance, operations, and prototyping. And so we'll use AR or VR depending on what domain we're working in. But so, since this is an air and space panel, I wanted to talk about naval aviation. So I have a short little video here about what the job of a landing signal officer is, and then what we're doing in VR to support that.
Landing signal officers, or LSOs, are the men and women responsible for guiding their fellow aviators to a safe and precise landing on the moving flight deck of an aircraft carrier. They're serving around the world, but there's only one place that offers the specialized training this job requires: LSO School in Virginia Beach. An F-18 Hornet is making its final approach to the flight deck as the LSOs guide the pilot of that plane to a safe landing aboard the USS Eisenhower. These naval aviators have assisted with thousands of carrier landings, and most are without incident.
And sometimes things get really bad, and when the weather gets rough, the seas are moving around, and it's really dark out, it's a challenge to get those aircraft aboard.
So LSOs land here to get the training they need to meet that challenge. Like most schools, this one has classrooms, but none are equipped with a simulator that puts the student on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier.
Roger ball, 27 knots. I think it's quite realistic. I think it's really good training for us.
Lieutenant Chris Nostro should know he's witnessed about 10,000 carrier landings, but you be the judge. This is the view from the simulator, and this is the view from the LSO platform on the flight deck. Still, there's no substitute for the real thing. However, the simulator can create adverse conditions without risking lives and airplanes.
So as Evelyn talked about this morning, just like at NASA, they have the big pool that they can do training in, and they have other giant simulators where they mock up a stage or a set that you can go on and train in. What was shown here was like one of those simulators. It's a giant 2-story room with big screens across it and real equipment in it, and people are working together in it. However, there's one location for that simulator in the United States. It costs a fortune to run, and it's a world-class simulator such that even foreign navies are coming to it and to experience it. But the killer is that you only get 6 hours in that simulator, and then you have to go off and land aircraft on the deck of a carrier. And that simulator was built in 1980 and written with Fortran. And it's still in use, and it's very difficult to maintain. So the lieutenant that built this VR system that you see here, he built it because he was an LSO, and he came out of that LSO school, and he said, I need a system where I can do refresher training anytime I want, anywhere I want. I want to put it in a gym bag, take it on the ship, and in my downtime I want to do training. So we built that out in Unity. We built out the entire carrier air environment in Unity, and that's kind of what you see here. We have the position of the pilot and the naval flight officer. They're both in VR in this case. You could hook up a real cockpit simulator to it if you wanted to. This is, again, it's completely networked in Unity. We have the LSO standing next to them in virtual reality, and we have the air boss. Air boss is the person that's up in the tower on the carrier. He's kind of like the flight control center, air traffic control center. But that person there is not in VR. We want them to be comfortable in whatever environment they are in, whether they want to wear VR or not VR, or however they want to be. So in that case, they're not wearing VR, but their body is tracked in the virtual environment. And they can walk up to those TV screens, which represent the windows that they might look out of their air traffic control center, and they can actually look down onto the deck of the aircraft carrier. So now we have a completely networked, super low cost, dispersed training system that can be used for refresher training when you're not in that simulator. And so that concludes my talk, and there's just some pictures of the Beamer Lab over the past couple of years. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Michael,
okay.
Continue.
Yeah, hi. I think I'm going to stand so I can see the slides. My name is Michael from Boeing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a specific project I've worked on in the last 6 or 7 months. And I come from the digital aviation organization from within Boeing. And digital aviation, we sell digital products to airlines all across the aviation industry. I think my group focuses primarily on phone and tablet apps for pilots, mechanics, flight attendants. I'm focused on the emerging technology industry and seeing how all across the spectrum of hardware and software, how it would be useful at different pockets at Boeing. We are just one pocket of immersive reality development at Boeing, and we're fairly early on. We have others that are further along in developing training for immersive reality. And I've never given this presentation 10 minutes, so I'm going to be going fairly quickly.
Oh, you can't. Now is the time.
Okay. HoloGear, that's what we've called this prototype. It's basically a holographic landing gear we built in Unity to run the HoloLens. It's got some interactivity. This is a picture we took in our 737 factory in Renton, Washington. And she actually works with actual landing gears in the factory. And this was a very early prototype that we showed her on the HoloLens. And she had an actual landing gear, right behind her in the factory. And she's, gaping at this holographic landing gear she's got floating in the air. We just thought it was a cool picture to start our presentation off with. So why did we build a holographic landing gear? Customers have been asking Boeing for a little while now, are you doing, specifically in training, what are you doing, how are you using virtual reality or augmented reality? And we have not had a strong unified answer. There's a lot we may be doing but couldn't talk about, but we wanted to build something that the customers really wanted to show them that, hey, Boeing is looking at this, here's a little peek. And we had the perfect opportunity after last summer when we had a partnership with Microsoft to come together, and we said, hey, we've got this conference in Vail where we're going to be inviting customers, maybe we can show them something there. So we had about 2 months, and we said, okay, let's do the HoloLens. We've got the right guys in the company to put together an experience, and we just started this new partnership, digital partnership with Microsoft. That would be a great way to show off that partnership. And so Jepson Connect was that conference, and we showed the first version of this holographic landing gear at the conference, and it was very well received. What it solves, the story we told at the conference was we want to enhance our training. At Boeing, we don't just sell military aircraft, satellites, airplanes. We also build and sell digital products. And we also train folks. In Renton, Washington, we have a site where we train pilots, maintenance technicians. And some of those training methods have been used for a very long time and could really use a refresher, things that could get the students out of their seat. And so using immersive reality in the classroom not only could save costs from reducing the amount of time you spend on training, especially the practical training side, but you can bridge that language barrier when you have foreign students come in and you have instructors teaching in English. If they're looking at a hologram or have a VR headset on, they're interacting directly with an aircraft or a component, and it's much more intuitive for foreign language speakers, as well as just the kinesthetic learners, folks that would rather not sit in a seat for 30 days lecture style looking at a PDF on a projector. So we had about 2 months to do this, and really one developer, Unity developer in Boeing. And then at the tail end, we had Microsoft, a few of their devs, help with some UI polish because we don't have a ton of experience building immersive reality experiences, and they know just the sound effects and the visual polish to add to make it pop. So they helped us a little bit at the end. And this is a quote from one of my leaders in digital aviation, Indy Cho. We didn't have a lot of guidelines. We had a lot of flexibility on this project, but he said, build something as different as possible. And I think we did that. Judging by the reception at the conference, I would say so. This shows a little bit of the envisioning process that we went through with Microsoft in order to create the video that I'm going to show next. But we had some Boeing folks, some Microsoft folks, critically the Boeing SMEs that knew information about how our curriculum works today with the training courses, to create this video and envision how we can do just that, how we can enhance our current training methods. So let's roll that video.
Generations of talented Boeing employees helped build the world's largest aerospace company and shape the course of history along the way. For the past 50 years, Boeing Flight Services has trained the world's best pilots and the best technicians. However, as our aircraft designs and products continue to evolve, so too must our training.
Our customers have given us feedback about our current training methods. Some of their biggest pain points are airplane access, class duration time, and training cost. I'm here to tell you we hear you.
We envision a new world for airplane maintenance, a world beyond traditional simulation and training, classrooms without walls, and a place of learning and in-service support that's founded upon collaboration and designed for continual improvement, for more effective training and improved turn time through better training that's both more affordable and more accessible for generations to come.
HoloLens allows us to address these issues by bringing the airplane into the classroom. This lets us teach theory and practical training in a realistic environment in a more effective and engaging way, ensuring that our students leave more prepared to do their jobs.
Boeing continues its journey of exploring the use of technologies for improving airplane maintenance training and in-service support with Microsoft's HoloLens.
Our airplanes are getting much more sophisticated. They can collect and report a lot of information about faults that may occur. With the HoloLens, the aircraft mechanics can refresh their knowledge about how to address these issues.
By using real-time fault reporting combined with electronic logbook, maintenance operations are able to pre-position critical resources such as parts, tools, and mechanics, provide just-in-time training to key personnel, and collaborate with subject matter experts to swiftly resolve in-service issues and reduce turn time.
By utilizing some of the latest technologies like HoloLens, we can transform the industry and deliver superior products to our customers. This dynamic approach propels Boeing into the next 100 years of flight.
Okay, so that's the video we produced in that envisioning process with Microsoft. And it gives you an idea of some of the additional use cases beyond what we built for this conference and this holographic landing gear that we could see in the future pursuing. So I know I've got about a minute maximum left, so I'll go through these pretty quickly. This shows some of that design process in the envisioning studio that we went through from the very first drawings of what we would like to build in the experience. You see an idea of a holographic landing gear start to come together there. We went and made observations in the factory, took some measurements to make it look as real as possible. We definitely went for the more realistic approach rather than fully abstract. And earlier in the training panel, I talked about you want to pursue either fully realistic or very abstract and try not to get caught in the middle. You can see a little bit of the evolution of this product and how we started actually with a Flash player. Some of these assets were already existing in Unity based on previous work that the company had done, but not in immersive reality. And so that saved us a lot of time to bring it to an immersive reality platform. That's a snapshot of an earlier build of what it looks like from the HoloLens landing gear, the PSEU unit floating up above it. That's actually a compartment on the plane just in front of where the landing gear comes down. We have lessons learned about the user interface, how we tried to teach gestures in the beginning and folks weren't figuring out how to use the air tap with the HoloLens, so we went to fully voice, and we found out that HoloLens doesn't deal with thick accents very well from folks from other countries, so now we have both. We have gestures and voice. And we have, instead of a poster that we would plaster to the wall to tell them what they can say as voice commands, we created this floating sphere, a voice command sphere we call it, that tells you what you can say, how you can interact with the holographic landing gear to learn more about it. And that's been somewhat effective, but you sort of have to look away to the floating sphere to see what it is and look back at the gear and then say it. So we want to add some more of that more intuitively, I guess, in line, popping out from the interactive components, so you don't have to look away. Shows some of the future scenes we're pursuing to pivot off of this prototype into something that we can integrate into our curriculum to be used in our training courses today. That involves getting the regulators to buy off so that we can incorporate into our curriculum, and why we would build it, save time, and just offer a better product so that students come away with more of the knowledge retained and improve on the job. I think that's it.
Thanks so much.
There you go.
Which button was it?
This one right here.
Oh, the font's not working. That's good. My name is Emre Deniz. I work at a company called Opaque Space. We are the smallest company and the least qualified company on this panel right now, so that's really intimidating for us to be here today. We are game developers at heart, and we have been working on essentially a product called Earthlight since 2015, where we developed a technology demo that became viral, that was essentially based around the journey of an astronaut, so showing players and the general public what it's like to train as and to work as an astronaut using publicly accessible consumer virtual reality kits. Our background at Opaque is that we were working in virtual reality about almost 5 years ago now. We're the first receivers of the HTC Vive developer kits as well as the Oculus HD kits, and we were working with motion mapped player avatar kind of solutions before motion map controllers were available. So we had a good background in how we approached our technology and game development. And in 2016, we were actually invited to do a production tour for gathering research materials at NASA Johnson Space Center and Sony Carter. We actually went to your lab, which was amazing. So we've essentially developed a number of different kind of experiences on the back of that. So we were progressing forward with a game that was encompassing this, but what ended up actually happening was that we started receiving a lot of interest from a range of different parties in regards to how we could deploy Earthlight as a platform as opposed to just being a single Steam VR release. And these are some of the kind of shots from the game as well. That's based on both the HTC Vive and the Oculus Touch kits. And it's based on the Unreal UE4. Is that video not working? Oh, yeah, okay. So that's some gameplay footage from our game. Essentially, I think it's an astronaut on the side of the Quest airlock that is going for a bit of an EVA over the Gulf of Mexico. And what it's showing is that it's quite a high fidelity environment that was built by quite a small team. And we've had quite a lot of, I guess, privilege and luck in collaborating with a range of laboratories at JSC and at Sony Carter as well, which allowed us in 2016 to build a fully interactive virtual reality neutral buoyancy laboratory environment as well. That is a pretty close representation of the Sony Carter facility, both above and below water as well. And we had some great access to information around that time that allowed us to construct an environment where we could train players in how to essentially skill up in virtual reality, as well as expose them to different kind of disciplines of astronaut training before we would deploy them onto the ISS. So it was about making that environment accessible and educating them about the journey of what it takes to go from training to deployment. What we found as well through multiple, I think dozens of exhibitions to almost several thousand players across PAX Australia, 2 years of PAX Australia and RTX and various other places, was that most people didn't even know that the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory existed until they actually played it and went, oh, there's an underwater ISS as well. So it was great being able to kind of educate the public in the various functions of what astronauts have to go through in order to even go up to space. This is so something else that kind of came out when we were doing a virtual reality kind of game was that we were able to actually have a lot of discussions with a range of laboratories in regards to virtual reality prototyping of different concepts, such as using augmented reality to help astronauts visualize things, or to try and find ways that we could increase the usability by doing prototypes such as LED lighting, doing a prototype of the Z3 suit with the advanced suit team kind of giving us feedback, and speaking to veteran astronauts such as Tom Marshburn in regards to what kind of things that he would have liked to have seen in an environment like this to help them with his mission as well. We also did a full representation of the Soyuz module as well, from its launch onto deployment of the low Earth orbit with the correct telemetry data as well, in order to kind of showcase our research fidelity and our research chops. How am I doing for time?
Still good. So
Okay.
you have another maybe 5 minutes or so.
Great. I'm quite jet lagged, so I came up from Melbourne. So the kind of points that we're really hitting in our design principles, because we are game developers, but we've actually kind of accidentally ventured into simulation territory, was that we wanted to really give players a sense of agency within the game, to make them feel like they were present within this environment. And that allowed us to also explore different affordances within this environment. So we were able to give players 2 hands and the ability to free look in virtual reality and explore what that meant for them to engage in how to explore environments, overcome obstacles, resolve puzzles, or actually engage in learning and see how they could retain information to kind of complete tasks in an increasingly difficult manner. And the next one was essentially authenticity. So discovering the subject matter and trying to teach players what it's like to be in microgravity and the difficulties and obstacles around that, such as placing them within arm's reach of a handle and watching them squirm, or spinning them around really quickly in zero gravity, which Evelyn actually showed us. So our trip to JSC was quite profound for us. We were able to visit a number of different laboratories where we collected a lot of reference material and information, as well as built a number of different contacts that we could draw upon and discuss a lot of our kind of game design principles with. But what that actually did was to give us quite a lot of insight into the inner workings of some of the different laboratories and what they were interested in seeing in virtual reality. So we went from being game developers to people who were kind of looking at different ways that we could use this platform, which was Earthlight, into empowering the people that we were kind of collaborating with. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just 1 second. I started with Tom Marshburn inside the mock-up of the ISS, so that was quite fun. Earlier this year, in March in 2017, we were actually invited to come back with the NASA Hybrid Reality Laboratory to do a test with the active response gravity offload system to see what our game would be like if we're in simulated microgravity, and also experience NASA's own ISS experience, which was using hybrid reality or physical objects on the ground for them to test what it's like to have, I guess, tactile and haptic feedback with virtual reality and in a simulated microgravity environment. For us as game developers, this was just quite a profound thing, but it also allowed us to open a new dialogue of collaboration where we've started pushing essentially hybrid builds of the NBL and our space experiences for the internal tests and other kind of plotting and scheming from the Hybrid Reality Laboratory in how they do, I guess doing testing and stuff like that for future deployments of VR training for astronauts alongside the VR lab. I'm not sure how closely, yeah. Okay, so this is photos of us essentially testing the game and testing their experiences and essentially doing an integration test. And their laboratory was quite happy with these testings, and we've started doing more and more collaboration where we're testing different concepts as well using the Unreal Engine 4. And that's me flying. Next. So to cap that off, the future of what we're doing is essentially looking at how we can use game engines and consumer-ready VR kits to explore these concepts with our collaborations, as well as give consumers access to previously inaccessible spaces like space, pun intended. And yeah, it's a shot of the Quest airlock. We're also doing a number of little virtual reality tourism stuff as well in regards to providing visualizations of environments such as, I think that's one of the TRAPPIST planets, because we're interested in essentially giving people access to not just real environments, but also fictional environments that are grounded in concepts of reality as well. Cool, thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for this great overview and many insights into how to use AR and VR further away. Oh, I don't think we need this anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, further away from this ground level. So, given that you have a lot of experience in working with VR and AR, so where do you really see the challenges that still need to be overcome for really reaching the full potential? Also, I think people would love to hear about like pitfalls, things that did not work, and where you would like things to improve still with the technology. And do you just want to start
Very happy
there?
to start, and then
Yeah.
kind of move on forward. I think NGreen's experience has been, especially because we deploy technology that's used out in the field, there's always a question of, well, when can we get access to the hardware? When can we start putting that stuff on our heads? And the reality is, I think the hardware is, there's still some ways to go in terms of the maturity of the hardware to be able to be used in a manufacturing environment or a maintenance facility. Oftentimes, we often forget that the people who have to do these jobs have to have a job to do, and in fact, if a tool gets in their way, they're not likely to really take advantage of it. So it's very important that whatever is provided to them is really going to help them do their job. So I think one of the things that we've certainly learned is how do you strip away the technology almost and get at the root of what the issues that they face out in the field really are, and how can you get to a place where you're providing just enough technology to help them solve their problem, as opposed to trying to come at the problem from the perspective of, let's see how much technology we can bring into the equation. So I think that that was certainly one of the things that we've learned as a company in these kinds of settings.
And complementing to that, and adding to his presentation, I'm going to say that that's precisely how we have been doing VR for astronaut training for so long. Is because we use the technology as much as necessary to provide that experience or yet that training for the astronauts. We don't overuse it, because then we defeat the purpose of what the task is for. Now, there's many experiences, and he was showing what he's trying to convey based on his gaming experience to see how much he can then extract training. In our case, we have been provided with the task and procedures and what is needed, so we bring as much of the technology we can to enhance that, but not too much, because then the user will not use it. I mean, we have many astronauts, they will say, you know what, I don't want to use the helmet. I don't, They will say, after they've done it once, a very experienced astronaut, they might not want to use the technology anymore. See, so there is a fine line. It's not going to work. The technology has to be enough to just provide that capability to whatever you're doing, whether it's in experience, in our case it's to true training VR, to true training. And I mentioned in my talk before, we had several tasks we're covering in conjunction, in addition to the MBL, which is the water pool training. We provide that enhancement training with VR, but just enough to just give him that extra training knowledge. But beyond that, if we do too much, they don't use it, or they don't want to use it. And it's all depends on that. So you're really working, or really walking a fine line to just bring all VR into and create a full experience. No. You got to know what this problem is. Like, Heidi I have this problem in the battlefield or with the Navy, and then see how the technology can improve that training. Her case, she brought something very important, which was the portability of it. Now you can give it to a lot of people that can go ahead and use it, but how very simplistically. So, I mean, all these parts into creating these systems have to, you got to really think about a lot into what will bring the most configurability for us. Configuration is very important. You can see in a space station, but we have to be up to date to today of what's going on in the space station. So our configuration has to be to today. You cannot show an astronaut a training if the station was seen last week, because it will be different. Solar arrays will be different in a different place. The robotic arm will be in a different place. So that was important to us. So everybody's going to have different problems. Bringing enough of the technology to enhance that is the only thing you need. Content, that's most important. All the data, bringing the data of any aircraft and anything you need, that's what it's going to be. How do you do that? How do you handle all that data? How do you make it, to come on, not just for show or for one time, but all the time, bringing that data. So that infrastructure behind the scene. And that's what we have built for so many years, just to get to that point to say, okay, we created this scenario and we're adding it all the time. Continuously, we're updating the station, the space station, and every mission. So that's what I just want to say. Bring enough to your purpose.
And then also, like within the DoD, we have very unique users. They might be using the system that we've built inside an air-conditioned training lab, or they may be using it up in space, like with Evelyn's case this morning. There's some pictures that she showed of using VR in space. With us, they may be using VR in a ship, which is essentially a metal box floating in the ocean or underwater. Or, if you're a Navy SEAL or a special warfare person, you might be out in the dirt, crawling on the ground, or in a very hot situation or a very cold situation where you need very unique specialized equipment. And a lot of times, you were saying that sometimes the astronauts don't want to use the system anymore. Well, we have, some of our soldiers carry tens of pounds or hundreds of pounds, I don't know how much they carry, a lot of equipment on them. And oftentimes they'll say, I don't want to wear another pair of glasses. I don't want to have this heavy, hot thing on my head where I have to see this information, and it's in a life and death situation when you're warfighting. So to be lightweight, low cost, heat, battery lifetime is important. All of those things, I think you listed a few things that were important to you. One of the pitfalls, one of the things that we've run into, I showed a video of a specialized augmented reality helmet we're using for a gunner's mate on a ship in my video. And we just did a live fire exercise last week aboard the USS Bunker Hill, a destroyer. And so they're outdoors, they're suited up, and they're seeing augmented reality heads-up display firing commands in their field of view. So you've got all of these conditions. You've got wind, sea spray, sun. They're completely suited up in this really hot suit with gloves on, because for fire control for weapons systems, they don't, there's heat and things they have to worry about. So, how are they going to feel wearing this giant headset and seeing augmented reality when they're in this very stressful firing situation, shooting this massive 50 cal gun that's blazing hot in their hands, and they're having to reload it with their hands and rack it? How are they going to feel about that, and are they even going to want to wear the headset? The problems in that case that they stated is that it's so confusing and it's so stressful as they're doing this job of shooting a target, and they're hearing all of these different firing commands for all these different groups aboard the ship, and they're trying to listen for their firing commands, that we think, oh yeah, seeing your firing commands is going to be a lot easier. It's going to take that level of stress off. It's going to take the confusion out of the picture. But I don't know. We're going to have to do a lot of testing to see, and we're going to have to do a lot of testing to see if they're going to want to wear that type of headset in any variety of situations.
Yeah, so from a Boeing perspective, challenges to bringing immersive reality into the aerospace industry, starting off with the FAA. Boeing and the FAA obviously work very closely, and it'd be really great if we could see them as an ally and something to be leveraged rather than something we have to fight against in order to, in my case, get immersive reality approved and integrated into a training curriculum, right? It has to go through the FAA. So the sooner that we can start having those meaningful conversations with the FAA and we can be buddies rather than seeing them as adversary that we have to get past in order to have this accomplished. I have not worked a lot with the FAA personally, so that's sort of how I see them, but maybe other folks at Boeing that have more experience don't see them that way. But that's something that has to happen in order for us to accomplish our goals. In the use case I talked about earlier. Another thing is, I assume this is true for some other companies as well, not just Boeing, but oftentimes it seems our leadership has priority on dollar signs, and if the dollar signs are not immediately clearly visible, then sometimes you get a lot of resistance to a new initiative. Rather than we say, oh, well, we can prove to you that our training is going to be a better product, And sometimes not even that is enough to get something to move forward, just having a better product. No, it's got to make us more money or cut costs. And I think that can hurt the company. And so it's, going to the thought leadership in the company and really convincing them. One way to do that, obviously, is to get some of this on their head and immerse them in it. That's I think that's the necessary step. And there are some other ways that you can get there. But bouncing off of that, if you don't have the buy-in to, hey, we know that this is going to result in better products, then it's hard to pre-position the resources and tools that you need to. The right human resources in Boeing in order to build these experiences, game engine devs, 3D artists, UX, folks for UX, we are severely lacking at Boeing. Those have not been priorities, so we don't have the right internal resources, and we're growing a lot there too. We're starting to get it, but we're still growing. We're not there yet, as well as the tools, right? So sure, we can get some licenses of Unity if we need, but we've got different pockets everywhere at Boeing, people building things, and we don't have a great way to share what we've built. And so we get a lot of recreation of all these assets, which take a long time in the first place to build. That's killer. And so, myself and the other devs at Boeing are really trying to make that clear to our leadership, that these are sort of basic tools that, maybe a startup was using from day one, where they can share their resources easily. But, we're all across the globe developing these things, and we can't just hand a USB stick to the guy next door. So that's another thing that's been a challenge.
There's a couple of funny anecdotes actually that I can share that touch on these things pretty well. I mean, the first challenge I guess that everyone should kind of overcome is ask yourself why you're using the platform. Using VR for the sake of using VR, for example, defeats the purpose of why that platform can offer you an advantage over why you just use a mouse and keyboard, or you would use a pen and paper pad. Understanding what advantages a platform can offer, I think, is probably the most challenging thing that any product development would face. And then seeking user feedback. So what ended up happening with us was we threw a bunch of prototype ideas at the advanced suit team. Some of them they said, yep, totally great idea, like having an inwards facing Connect 2 sensor that would be able to provide essentially data back to like the flight controllers or mission control or the EVA office. And we thought that was a good idea. And then we ended up speaking to someone from the EVA office who turned around and said that astronauts would never want monitoring of their biodata by a Connect 2 sensor because of just the way that they approach their training and their regiments. And it occurred to us that the nuances of seeking user feedback, whoever that user is so incredibly important that you could actually rabbit hole down an entire track of development without realizing that your end user has no desire to use your product, and on top of that believes that the concept is detrimental to what they're trying to achieve. So even the prototype that we had in the game of a Z3 suit was something that an astronaut in real life would never want to wear because they felt like it would intrude upon their discipline as an astronaut and their ability to perform. And the other one was when we were watching the training videos of the NBL with Kate Rubin's dive, the thing about the currency of data is very important because in the video, for example, the test director was explaining to the astronauts who were training in that video that some of the handlebars were no longer up there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they were saying, oh yeah, that handlebar you just grabbed, that's not there anymore. So remember, just keep that in mind. And to think about that as a concept, that astronaut would have to remember the next time that they're up on the ISS and the S1, S0 truss or something near a radiator that, hey, that handlebar that you're trying to grab, not there. So the currency of the information that you're displaying in mixed reality or augmented reality or virtual reality, it has to be relevant to your end user as well. So not just getting the correct feedback from your end user, but also making sure the data is accurate to what they need in order to accomplish whatever they're trying to do. And that's, it's agnostic of whether you're building a game or you're building an enterprise tool or you're providing a service. It's just the reality of information depiction as well.
Thanks. There's a lot of insights.
Yeah. and to add to that, I mean, this is what I was saying about keeping your information up to date based on what you needed to apply to. I mean, that's probably the most important, part of it. I think he realized that very soon. To maintaining and keeping that information up to date was, especially when you're doing it for training in real time. You want to keep all these environments and variables that you're dealing with up to date, and they're feasible and realistic if you're doing training. For experiences, it's different. So you have different applications of VR or AR, whether it's experiences or whether it's a real training. And those two requires two different sets of content and how you keep that. And creating that content, like I said before, creating that environment for that content is the most important thing. So I can go on for, let's go, yes.
So I think some of us had hinted about it up here. One of the things that I wanted to add about some of the headsets is that at least working within the DoD, we have big restrictions on what can and cannot be used in certain places at certain times. A lot of those restrictions have to do with Bluetooth, with Wi-Fi, with cameras, with scanning technologies that sort of kind of resemble cameras. And then also, I mentioned this in the Navy, it's a big metal box sitting in the middle of the ocean, bandwidth. So anything where you have to send something up to the cloud, especially to some industry cloud that's not government owned, I mean, just huge restrictions. And so, we get all excited about, ooh, there's this new headset that does this and does that. Well, usually they're doing more Bluetooth and more Wi-Fi and more streaming to the cloud and more cameras and sensors on it. And so while everyone in the consumer space is going, yay, this headset's great, us in the DoD space are going, oh, now there's another thing I have to deal with. How am I going to turn off the Bluetooth? How am I going to turn off the Wi-Fi? How am I not going to stream back to the cloud?
See, for social media, it's great. Or communication, right? That's what people want. But us, I mean, we have been,
really
it's more constraining. Yeah, we have other issues.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's amazing to see how the requirements really depend so much on the task and the purpose. And it's also exciting to see how the different purposes really trigger the development of technology. I mean, all of you were quite visionary in the things you did. What I'd love to hear, and I hope others want to hear more about this as well, is like, where do you see this going? Like, where do you see the potential of this for the next 10, 20, 30 or more years? Like, if you envision what it could be, what are your thoughts?
That's a hard question to answer. And I think if I knew the answer to that question, I'd probably be making a lot of money in a different way.
Yeah, we figured that's the right audience.
But you will.
Because you all work from a higher perspective, basically, more or less, up to like hundreds of
what's really interesting about the technology is that at some point in time, we kind of hope that the technology goes away or that it becomes invisible, right? So I think part of the challenge that you face in the VR, AR, mixed reality world is that there's so much technology. And it requires so much work to get it into a place where it's ready for people to use. So those are barriers to entry for sure. And I think that there's a real opportunity down the road as the technology gets better, as the capabilities and our ability to visualize and project information into the world around us allows us to go and put that information out in the world without requiring us to, let's say, take on board so much additional technology. That's when I think you'll actually start to see people really taking advantage of that. The moment that it becomes naturally part of what you do and how you do your job, and that you don't even have to think about it, that's when the technology really starts to get interesting.
And well, to add into that, I mean, basically, helmets, I mean, as I recall 20 some years ago when I started, they were big, bulky. Now they're, cheaper, less expensive, less bulkier, faster, better. I mean, we want to see just regular glasses as our VR. I mean, that's where really people are going to use it, everywhere for the masses. I mean, nobody wants to be wearing a helmet. And nobody wants to cover completely their vision and not be aware of the world. I mean, that's another thing. So as technology gets faster, cheaper, smaller, compact, wearable, like the wearable technology, which is going on, we have our phones everywhere. So AR will become that too. AR will become part of our life. We're not going to be able to fix anything looking at a paper anymore. And we have accomplished that even with the astronauts. They used to look at paper to do that. Now they use our graphics. they visualize their space station with our graphics. So that has improved, and that's where the technology is going to get faster, better, smaller, more wearable for those kind of instances, and the ecosystem behind it will be more easily shareable between the different industries or within the industry, so that everybody will share the same information. See, people forget about that, what's going on behind the scene of a helmet or an AR system. There is a lot of information you need to obtain, capture of a system to know how you're going to fix it. So how are you going to be doing that for every part of any system that you want to repair or do operations? So all that information has to be well done, and that's where we're going, to be more smaller, compact, faster. And yes, we do have restrictions in the military or the government for obvious reasons, but we'll overcome that by being more focused into different tasks and providing those soldiers or people or astronauts in particular for that operation. But out there in the world, everybody will be using, like they use Facebook, they'll be using VR and AR everywhere. So.
I think we all have a clear vision of how we believe the glasses are going to get lighter weight, more powerful, wider field of view, better graphics. But we've got to start, at least for training, bringing our hands into the environment as well. Mm-hmm. And so we need to get more research, more industry partners involved in not only being able to visualize your hands in the space and doing maneuvers with your hands, but also getting that haptic feedback with your hands. That's super realistic, because when we do training, that there's one aspect of training which is learning the process. Oh yeah, I press button 1 and then I press button 2 to do this task. The other part of training is the muscle memory. And for especially soldiers that have to work in very hostile environments, sometimes they have to work in the dark. Your folks have to work in the dark sometimes. You have to have the muscle memory. You have to know that, oh yeah, the button number 1 is over here and button number 2 is down here. And so that's really important, that we bring our hands into VR and AR, and that we have that haptic feedback without necessarily having to build a huge set.
Exactly, having to be too, yeah. And it's out there. I mean, it's some out there, but that needs to get better.
Getting there. Mm-hmm.
That needs to be much better. I agree.
So just looking at the technology, not necessarily just in aerospace, you could say I'm a little more skeptical than some of my contemporaries in the industry of, hey, this, all of this is here to stay, like this is just going to keep going up, 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 up. I would say I'll believe it when I see it, when everyone everywhere is adopting this and using it every day. I don't think it's impossible. I think there are some things in maybe some combination that need to be met for that to happen. Some of the things I think about are the content has to be super compelling, right? You think about the Wii, you think about first generation Vive. For so many, the Wii sold so many units and then sat on the shelf. The content was not bringing people back to it. The awesome controls at the time was not bringing people back to it. Some people, yes. The Vive sits on my shelf. I don't have content that brings me back. And I work in this industry. I love this stuff, but there are other things that are more compelling to me. Watching movies, playing computer games instead of VR games. Talking about industry. Obviously, some companies are using mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality in their businesses today and saving money already. That's great. I think there will always be companies using, especially VR is already being used and saving people money. That's not going to go away as long as people are saving money, and that's great. So it'll never completely go away, but for it to just keep going up and up and everyone to start using it, the content has to be very, very compelling. And frankly, we're not even close for consumer content. Maybe some of the stuff is starting to get there where people are getting back in their Vive every day to play it. Form factor, obviously we've talked about that. It has to come down to be very simple to use from a form factor standpoint. From a user input standpoint, I think it needs to be very intuitive. The current user input for mixed reality, I don't think is good enough for Windows holographic. For VR controllers, I think if we could get that to be so much more intuitive and maybe just have your hands and yet still have the flexibility of having buttons so you can use all your different weapons and games. In some way, we just have to be innovative in how we think about it. I think that'll be another key enabler. So, super compelling content, the form factor, the user input, and then from an industry standpoint, I think the delivery of the content being very intuitive as well and very accessible. Just as you could go on your phone or your laptop and Google something, you should be able to say, okay, I want to get a holographic, landing gear trainer app and put it on my HoloLens in, 10 seconds. I think that would go a long ways to accelerate the mass adoption.
Any thoughts?
Well, 30 years is an interesting thing. I mean, in the past 4 years, we saw the availability of consumer VR, and this is the second, I guess, availability of virtual reality. So there appears to be a critical mass of how technology is able to progress for mass adoption, which is that you need to have parallel industries that are growing and also, in a way, allowing for the general public to accept technology use so that it can use more technology. And the more that those things can converge into becoming seamless is quite important. So if I told someone 50 years ago that they were going to have a little thing in their hand that they were never going to look up from, and it was going to tell them everything that was happening 24 hours a day in every part of the world, that would be science fiction. And it would be technologically infeasible. You would have billions upon billions of dollars, but you would not be able to reach that, that pinnacle or that level of technology required to be able to deliver that. So 30 years from now, it's very probable that we'll be looking at a convergence of these platforms that is very difficult to predict. And things like they're looking at neurocomputing or integration of neural wiring, I guess, and things like that are quite hard because we don't know how we will even accept those things until that we have a parallel track of the use of technology that kind of is in lockstep with each other. So that in order to use virtual reality, we needed to have smartphone displays. And in order to get smartphone displays, we needed to get the idea of Bill Gates going up with the kind of the Windows Surface computer, and then for that to get knocked off by the Apple and made very kind of easy to use. So there's always kind of a progression that has to happen first, I think. And trying to predict that, I personally feel can be quite difficult. And people ask me, like, a year ago we barely had motion map controllers, for example. And 6 years ago, if someone said, "Are you going to make a VR game?" I'd laugh at them. And it wasn't until I was able to actually nook and arrow in using motion map controllers in the HTC Vive that I actually thought that prior to that I was quite skeptical of VR. And then after that I thought there is some merit to how this technology can be used for consumers, notwithstanding the fact that VR has been used for enterprise training and services and even tools for the past, like since the 1960s, basically. Like NASA has been using it since the 1960s for both research and for training purposes as well. So 30 years from now, I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was pretty important. That I think that in the future, you're really going to see whoever has the most prettiest, aesthetically pleasable. And this is for the masses because, like I said before, we need to make the clear differentiation between how you use it for training or how you use it for experiences or how you experience your phone for information that you're receiving. You're not training, you're just gathering information that you want. So that the most pleasing, aesthetically appealing to you, that's going to be very important. Whoever, I can name a couple of companies that would probably be able to get it there and do it that way. And that's what you're going to see in the future because the technology is getting there. I mean, it's almost there with all these different displays and bendable displays and faster computing. But again, every industry has their differences, and I was gonna mention something pretty kind of funny but if funny is part of how you grow the technology. We used to have gloves, and you mentioned the gloves and how to do touch, right, or hand gestures. That's very important. the interface with the synthetic world and your world and how you visual yourself inside, that is very important. As soon as we can have an astronaut doing this and looking at some view, but as soon as they see their hand, they know they are there. As soon as you see part of yourself, you're like, whoa, I'm there, I'm actually there. Now we have gloves. We use gloves for many years. And I used to rebuild them, you know, I rebuilt probably 20 of them. And we used to have sensors in every finger so that they can see their finger. And it was like a wow moment to see them. Again, this is going back 15 years, 20 years, and you see them doing that and they're worn out. And we said, well, what are we gonna do? I mean, this is keep failing. And we had the technology. We can track them and we can see the hands. Again, this is 20 years ago. But then we realized they were failing. They worn out. We have to keep on changing it. Well, what we realized is that we really needed is just grasping. We just needed to know when an astronaut grasps a handrail, and that's it, and let it go, grasping. So we said, okay, we don't use the sensor. We don't need that. And we went and just have a sensor that will simulate the grasping. And that's what we use today. Now, again, I just wanted to mention that is how important it is to your problem and how important it is what you're trying to solve and what you're trying to use this. That's what we still have today. We're looking for better gloves. We're looking how to do it wirelessly. I mean, how to have use Bluetooth instead of having wire. But these are things that, you know, everybody doing development in VR, and I had to think of the purpose. I just wanted to, I had that in my mind. I just wanted to mention that. But again, the technology is just definitely, I see the future as part of us.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'd like to open it up to the general people, whatever questions you might have.
I have a question. This one's for Heidi, but anyone's really open to talk about it. I think I hear a lot about, obviously, technology, hardware, software, but what doesn't feel like it's talked too much about is psychology. And I come from a background of flight training. We used to do critical engine takeoffs, and you could just see like helmet fire. They'd lock down and they just kind of crash and burn in those first couple of sessions. But I kind of realized we were programming them after 10 sessions, after 15, 20 sessions. They were able to overcome that initial oh shit factor and then begin training, kind of. And I guess even a more recent example of that was the Hudson River landing, where, you know, it's quite well documented, and it took about 7 seconds before they took action, and you just, so psychology seems to be both an underpinning to all this, but and it's something that's not necessarily in the forefront. But when I think about what the future is, and particularly in training and some of these spaces that you guys are in, the programming of people, which seemed like, you know, you watch The Matrix and they kind of jack in and they get all this information, and it was, oh, that's so like fanciful. But then you start seeing that, yeah, you know what, there's something to that. So my question is, you know, where within means for what you can talk about, but where are we with that? Like, have we, as people in the frontier of this, have we kind of realized that actually, you know what, this is one of the most central components to everything that we're doing here, and is it getting the attention that I think is, you know, you come to a conference like this, and you said muscle memory, and that's about as far as we get into that conversation.
So there's other groups that are more studying the cognitive side of it within the military. But the story I can tell is that a really simple VR story here, there's lots of scenarios that soldiers have to go into that are terrifying. And there's training courses that they have to take that are terrifying. And two that I can think of is they'll put people on a real ship. It's on land, but it's a ship that's on land. And they'll set a room on fire, and you're in it, and you have to put the fire out. And that's terrifying the first time you do that in real life. The other thing is for helicopter training, they'll, like these pools that are at NASA, they take the helicopter up, you know, this fake helicopter, but you're in it, and they dunk it upside down in the pool. And you have to figure out how to get out, and you're upside down, and you're turned around, and you're in water. It's terrifying. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're just starting to 360 film those training events. So now what the students normally do is they go from a PowerPoint, hey, we're going to set this room on fire, deal with it, or we're going to sink you and deal with it. So now we're going from PowerPoint to just 360 video immersive training, which hopefully gets you past the oh shit factor and then allows you to really do this real life scary training. So you're right, the cognitive part of it is very important. The muscle memory is important, actions are important, all of these things are important, but we need to improve training for our warfighters because it's life and death with them, especially even out in space, it's life and death. You have to have the best training possible. And the cognitive aspect, the scary part of it, is important.
That's what, yes.
Yeah, no, I was going to add to her is, in our case, for example, when we send an astronaut to outer space, right, and they're going outside, it's a terrifying moment just to get out of the airlock and to be in space and you're hanging, you're skydiving to the Earth. When they come back and they say, how was the VR training for you? Did it help you? We have astronauts come and say, doing this in VR before gave me the courage. So the same with them. Now, there is another factor of it, very important. I don't know if I've talked to you in more in depth, but it's also who you're training. You have soldiers. What capability of training behind they have for physically? Our astronauts go through a lot of physical training, but we have a few. We don't have numbers and numbers of soldiers with different levels of in-depth of, I will say, education, if you will, but also education and doing it themselves. We send our astronauts, and again, they're few, if you count them, they go out there and do physical training. But so, the level of people you're training with, the level that they need to be, all this is extremely important. But the psychological part is, and VR has helped. It has helped us to be there.
There seems to be a huge opportunity for just that, like kind of both mining who's appropriate and for some of these functions, both getting to the heart of, is this person actually appropriate, but also, where you have that large set, competency-based training where you can kind of go through these revolutions and then filter out maybe some of the different capabilities to say, this subset is, just a final note, like one of the things that I find quite challenging is that, we have these aircraft simulators and they're multi-million-dollar simulators and I have, the price point will go down and people will get more exposed to it, but it's often the simple things, cockpit familiarization, switch out, sequences, and those things can go right now and get into the mainstream and make a huge impact, but you don't necessarily, at least from a commercial point of view, you don't necessarily see those being adopted, which I find quite difficult in the context of trying to. You see a lot of opportunity there, but you might not be able to actually execute.
Right.
Quite yet. Sorry.
All right. In the interest of time, I wish we could discuss for another hour or so, but in the interest of time to somewhat stay on schedule, I'd like to thank all the wonderful speakers, all the organizers for this amazing panel.